My name is Janet Page. I have been with Mac Tac for 19 years, the last 6 of which have been in a marketing role supporting our industrial tape and medical business. Joining me today from our technical side is Steve Schroff.
Hi, I'm Steve Schroff. I'm the business development chemist for the industrial tape products. I've been with Mac Tac 17 years, in the industry for 20, and the bulk of that time has been spent in various R&D and engineering roles throughout the company.
So the format of today's webinar and discussion is really going to be in kind of a Q&A style format. I am going to ask Steve some questions and help to really frame out how Mac Tac brings value to the adhesive and tape marketplace and how we can help you find the right solution for your application. I'll give you just a little bit of background about Mac Tac. Mac Tac is a $350 million company. We're based in Stowe, Ohio. In 2016, we were acquired by Lintec, a $2 billion company based out of Tokyo, Japan. Our Stowe location is North American headquarters for Lintec USA companies. And here's just some background about Mac Tac's overall product portfolio. We specialize in pressure-sensitive laminates for a variety of markets and applications. We have a graphics business, and the graphics team focuses on materials that are used in signage, wayfinding, fleet marking, window, wall, and floor graphics that are typically all wide format inkjet printed. Generally, these materials are focused on printers and sold through the distribution channel. Our industrial medical and tapes division is the division that Steve and I both represent. And these products are typically double-sided tapes, double-sided foam tapes, transfer adhesives with high performance adhesives, and used in a variety of mounting and bonding applications. We also have a line of medical tapes that go into everything from wound care to bandage to electrodes. All of those products are skin tested and skin friendly. We have a sheets division, which sells cut sheet, laser, offset, and digital materials, generally sold through paper merchants. We have narrow roll and our roll label division, both of which selling materials that ultimately become labels in a wide variety of different print and converting applications. Our adhesives find themselves and our labels find themselves on UL labels and prime labels for packaging and product labeling. And what we're going to talk about today is really Mac Tac's innovation in the world of adhesive development and how those adhesives, when delivered to the marketplace in tape format, help our customers solve different types of bonding challenges. So what I'd like to do is start with a question for Steve. And so Steve, I guess given your many years as a technical specialist, how does Mac Tac really distinguish itself from our competition?
So where Mac Tac really sets itself apart is that first and foremost, we are adhesive formulators. Other tape suppliers, they primarily are buying their adhesive from third-party manufacturers, whereas our strategy is to internally manufacture the adhesives that we use in our various tape of constructions. Over the years, we've formulated dozens of commercially successful adhesives in our various foams, films, and free-films constructions. And you know, in reality, we have several hundred formulas probably sitting in the toolbox. And this is really all made possible by our use of design of experiment methodology and some of the statistical software. So the benefit here is that should an off-the-shelf product of ours come and not work for a specific application, and we see a trend rising in the market, we can just go back to those experiments, plug in different parameters, and generate a whole new type of adhesive pretty quickly.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that this benefits our customers because we're able to quickly respond to changes in the marketplace.
Right, yeah. A lot of the base work's already done. We just need to go in and pull it out.
Great. Well, you know, it might be helpful for our listeners to understand the scale of our adhesive production. So Steve, can you just give us a sense of how much adhesive we produce on an annual basis?
Sure. We produce about 25 million pounds annually, give and take. So every year, Adhesives and Sealants Industry, ASI, they publish the top 25 adhesives and sealants producers in the world. In 2019, Mac Tac ranked number 16, Lintec ranked in at number 8. What's really impressive, though, is that this list includes sealants and structural adhesives along with pressure-sensitive adhesives, and traditionally there's a lot more structural adhesives and sealants sold. So in order to make the list, considering that Mac Tac only makes pressure-sensitive adhesives, is really quite an achievement. And then furthermore, we're not selling adhesives to the open market. We're just using all the adhesive we make really within our four walls.
Great. And Steve, what kind of adhesive technology do we specialize in formulating specifically for the tape market?
Really, for the tape market, we're really focused on formulating 100% solids adhesives.
And can you just tell us a little bit more about what 100% solids really means? And is it correct that we don't coat any solvent-based adhesive systems?
Correct. So we've taken all the organic solvents, or put it another way, we've taken out all the VOCs from our facilities for coating. So none of our solvents, or I'm sorry, none of our adhesives use solvent as a coating method. We completely exited all solvent coating in Mac Tac facilities back in 2014. The technology that we're using primarily for our industrial tapes is, for our industrial tapes is focused around hot melt rubber and then UV curing for the acrylics. Although we're also familiar with the emulsions and the solvent-based acrylics. For example, we're formulating a new line of lower cost, higher performing acrylic products now, hopefully be available at the end of the year. And this is really going to allow our customers to have a domestic US option for competing against some of the very cheap offshore products that are coming in. And as always, we still have a limited offering of legacy solvent products through the Lintec companies, as we continue the process of transitioning those legacy products over to 100% solids as well.
Thank you. So Steve, why do you think our listeners should find Mac Tac's approach to adhesive technology beneficial, or how does our approach really help them in the marketplace?
Well, the big thing here is that we're not buying the same commercially available adhesive that everybody else is buying and simply rebranding them as our own solutions. What you really find in the industry is that there's remarkably little diversity in terms of the adhesive supply, especially in North America. Everyone's buying these adhesives pre-made from third-party vendors, but when you look at the acrylics, and in this case solvent acrylics, which most of our listeners today are using solvent acrylics for their type of products, there's only 2 acrylic suppliers out there that are supplying all the tape manufacturers in the industry. And when you look at the rubbers, there's only 3 hot melt rubber suppliers out there. So there's not a lot of diversity out there.
And how does the lack of diversity really impact, I guess, end use applications, really where our customers would need a product to do something or maybe to perform differently?
Well, our adhesives can simply be more tailored for specific needs in the market that we serve and the requirements. The benefit of being a tape and adhesive manufacturers, that tape manufacturer are always going to be a level closer to the various end user applications, and thus we have a better understanding of the substrates and the surfaces that the adhesives must adhere to. We're always running into surfaces that have a lot of plasticizer migration, or might have some type of anti-block or mold release agent on there, or might have to be used in an environment such as UV resistance, chemical resistance, or heat resistance. So we can tailor to those. Also, we have a much better in-depth understanding of the interaction between the release liners. You know, it's not always about the adhesive. Every laminate's going to have a liner, and the liner selection and how that performs is really ultimately going to affect the converting of the product and the end-use application of that product. And then we also understand the converting which takes place and design adhesives specifically for converting. Another major impact is that our adhesives are designed specifically for our equipment, and our equipment really has some extensive capabilities, which we'll cover in another webinar coming up in this series. The benefit of making the adhesives that are for our own use and not making adhesives which are going to be coated by 20 or 30 different companies with varying levels of capability and needs is that we can take full advantage of our process. And it really, quite frankly, allows us to use unique raw materials that other manufacturers would never consider. The end use of that, or the real benefit of that, is that we can create some very unique, high-performing adhesives.
Great. Steve, I think this would be a good time to talk to our audience about some of the adhesive solutions we've developed for our tape customers.
Sure. So, you know, the number one application we always come across regardless of market is foam bonding and fabrication. Tons of foams out there, EPDMs, cross-linked polyethylenes, neoprenes, SBR, Santoprene, there's a whole bunch of them. And an adhesive we have here is what we call our 593 XT or Mac Bond XT. And this is the adhesive we developed to stick to a wide variety of foams. Again, being able to formulate our own adhesive and taking advantage of our capabilities is this adhesive is pretty unique in that you have a very aggressive adhesive and high shear. So it can give you 15 pounds of peel, 15 pounds of quick tack, but it can hold a 5-pound shear forever. And most of our competitors rate their shears on 2.2 pounds, which is a kilogram. For this adhesive, if you really want it to fall, you have to use a 10-pound weight. And the benefit to that is that we simply can offer a whole range of products in one. You don't have to sacrifice adhesion to gain creep resistance, and you don't have to sacrifice creep resistance to gain adhesion. Another area is that, there's got to be 10, 15, 20,000 different types of formulations of foams out there, different colors, textures, and everything. So one adhesive doesn't do it all. So the next type of adhesives we have would be our FBR 899 and our HTA 410 acrylic. And these adhesives really excel at textured surfaces. So they're very good for open cell foam, some of the polyurethanes you see out there, and textiles, as well as the other foam types I mentioned. So in 410, sometimes you just need a foam fabricating adhesive that's acrylic. Maybe it's got need to have some temperature resistance, or it's going to see some chemicals. So 410 is a very good acrylic for foam fabrication type market, and 899 is really what we call our Swiss Army knife of knives, our Swiss Army knife of adhesives. Whenever we get a substrate that's difficult to stick to or nothing else sticks, this is the one we always go for, and 9 times out of 10, the 899 ends up adhering. Holding power and mounting. So our Ultra 555, this is where we need to hold some type of object or fixture to a vertical surface, usually a wall. The best use example of this would be bathroom fixtures, and given the current environment we're all living in, would be hand sanitizing stations. So if you go into a grocery store, a hotel, a convenience store even, a lot of these places now have automatic dispensing hand sanitizer units, and a lot of these little units are held up with our mounting adhesives, as well as when you look in restrooms, your soap dispensers, your urinal drips, your air freshener, even your paper towel dispensers. Nowadays they're being mounted with tape, that way that nobody has to drill through tile, and it's just for an ease of applying. And this adhesive is our maximum holding power. So when I was talking about 593, I mentioned its shear resistance, and you have to use a 10-pound weight to get it to fail. With this adhesive, to get everyone an idea of how strong it is, when we talk shear, we talk a 1 inch by 1 inch square. And in this case, we actually had to go out and buy a 25-pound kettlebell to actually get it to fail. Higher temperature applications, heat shields, electronics. We have our HSA 440. So this adhesive came about when we just needed to have an acrylic that had a higher shear and holding power, but also more temperature resistance than, say, our 410. Recent application here is bonding a noise deadening type of fabric material to a heat shield, and it has to withstand 485 degrees continuous temperature exposure. This is how this adhesive was born. So it's also seen a lot of use in electronic type applications, anything that's generating a lot of heat, automotive under the hood, near the exhaust systems, things like that. Another adhesive we developed here, I'm sorry, I went one little too far, is our zero temperature kind of wet surface, or what we call our Mac Bond Arctic. So the benefit here is that we see it a lot in building constructions where our construction workers, builders are wanting to push out the construction season as long as possible. They don't want to bring their tape inside at night and then take it back out. and use it. They're leaving the tape in the truck or at the construction site. Well, it might dip below zero that night and the tape might still be cold and next morning doing stuff. So with our Mac Bond Arctic, this adhesive we formulated, it's very interesting is that it can be stored at -20 degrees and you can pull it out and stick it to a cold, damp, wet surface and it will still adhere. In fact, we also have videos of this on our website. The links will be here at the end of this where you can actually see the video where we take it out of the freezer, -20, and stick it to wet surfaces. Pretty unique adhesive there. Another adhesive we developed worth mentioning here is our LSE 427 acrylic. So this is for low surface energy type plastics. Again, your low surface energy plastics are your polyethylenes, your polypropylenes, and your TPOs. As I always tell people, we're living in a plastic world, and those plastics are starting, we're starting to take cost out. So we're starting to move away from the ABS and the nylons and move to the cheaper type plastics. Again, your TPOs, your PPs, polyethylenes, polypropylenes. These adhesives are low surface energy, and it's very hard for acrylics to stick to them. Rubbers have no problem sticking to them, but sometimes, again, you might need to have some chemical resistance or UV resistance, and you need an acrylic. We have a modified acrylic, then tackified acrylic, which can stick to these surfaces. Then the last adhesive I'll point out here is our clean tape line. This is all of our UV acrylics are low outgassing, low migration, but the clean tape just takes it to a whole new level, takes it a step further. So this is one that we really recommend for printed circuits and electronics, sometimes even automotive applications. Here you're talking about flexible circuitry and airbag sensors, seat heaters, things like that. Something where it's got to be clean, not migrate, not outgas, not degrade the circuit in any way, shape, or form.
Great, thank you, Steve. That's a great summary. So can you talk to us a little bit about how Mac Tac's approach to adhesive development, or you've mentioned it's unique, what advantage does this really bring to our customers?
So, you are correct. We are unique, and we are truly bringing a one-of-a-kind solution to the table here, not just a Me Too product. And thus, we're also allowing our customers to go out and differentiate themselves amongst their competition with our products.
Great. And can you tell us just a little bit more about the advantages of 100% solids adhesives and how that really helps the customer in the marketplace?
Sure. Well, 100% solids adhesives are going to be more efficient to manufacture, and they're also going to be more environmentally friendly and sustainable at the same time. The first thing here is, again, efficiency to manufacture. By eliminating the solvent, you're eliminating the need for drying, and drying is really the rate limiting step that determines lighting speed, and it's very energy intensive. It takes a lot of natural gas to fire the ovens that dry these products. We manufacture all these on our high efficiency coater in our Scranton, Pennsylvania facility, right next to the Dunder Mifflin facility in Scranton. But it is a high efficiency coater, and it's the only type of a coater. It's the only coater of its kind in the world. We'll cover this more in the next webinar about the coater and its capabilities.
Great. And Steve, it sounds like also one of the benefits in working with Mac Tac is really just a security of supply, because we're sourcing our raw materials directly and we're manufacturing our own adhesives. We don't need to worry about allocations, or at least they impact Mac Tac and Mac Tac's customers less heavily. And we can also work around technical disruptions that tend to impact the industry. Would you say that's a fair statement?
Yep, that is all true.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, maybe we can just recap some of the other benefits that customers get when they work with us as a tape customer.
Sure, and just real quick, Janet, there's two other bullet points I want to cover here about being more backward integrated and manufacturing our adhesives. Really, by manufacturing our adhesives too, we're taking out a step out of the supply chain. And what that really allows us to do is be more responsive and reduce lead times and give the customer a better chance of getting the right product right out of the gate for their application. That's a key point we should mention. And then again, another thing I'd like to touch on is that a lot of people are really pushing the green initiative and looking for highly sustainable products, but then they get the sticker shock. And in the case of our technology, the green and highly sustainable is inherently lower cost and not necessarily doesn't push a premium. It's not a higher cost solution, but you can still meet those green and sustainable concerns and requirements.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. I'm glad you brought those up. Yeah, so maybe now we can just touch on some of the other resources and services we can offer our customers.
Again, touching on the fact that, as a tape manufacturer, we are formulating and manufacturing our adhesives. It also means that we do have a full staff of R&D chemists and engineers on hand with all the lab expertise and in-depth knowledge of all the materials that are out there, the applications, the converting, and just the industry and the regulatory requirements that might go along with a lot of these applications that are out there. Another nice thing about being a tape manufacturer and an adhesive formulator is that if we do see a new trend emerging, there's no need to pass all the CTQs up to another level and hope we get back a viable solution. Again, being closer to the end use application and all the requirements, we can ourselves take all that information, digest it internally, and come out with a solution. We don't have to communicate it up, let them interpret what we are saying, and then kind of go back and forth to write the solution. So again, it allows us to be quick, which really brings me into our the next point here, which would be, for having all this capability, we are still a small company feel, and really allows us to be quick and nimble and respond to our customers' challenges very quickly in coming up with a solution. And then, with our analytical services, one of the nice things here is that, we can help our customers resolve problems they might have, even if they're unrelated to any adhesives. A lot of times a customer sends in a material to us, they're having trouble sticking to it. We identify it. And again, I talked about surface contaminants, anti-block agents, sometimes it's not even the right material, or there's more recycled content than they think. There's a lot of times we solve customers' problems that are completely unrelated to adhesion, just by all the capability that we have.
That's great. Well, I think now is a good time to talk just a little bit about our essentials portfolio. Because as I'm sure you all realize, the world of tape, the world of adhesives, there's a lot to know, there's a lot of different materials. So what we've done is created kind of a streamlined portfolio of products to help our customers select the best tape solution for your application. So we've created the essentials portfolio designed to take the guesswork out of your adhesive and tape selection. The essentials feature some of our best-selling rubber adhesives and some new additions to our product portfolio, including FBR 899, the Swiss Army knife of adhesives, and our HSA 440 acrylic adhesive. There is a URL on this page, so you can download the essentials adhesive selection matrix and the product matrix, which are great tools to keep at your fingertips so that you can select the right tape and adhesive combination for whatever you're trying to do. All of these products in this series are available with a low 1 master rule minimum order quantity. We'll get them shipped out to you in 5 to 7 business days. And honestly, if you're not sure what product you need, we do offer a generous sample program so you can find the best tape solution for your application. So just work with your sales team and they can help get samples. If you need a custom sample, that's no problem. And we can certainly get this out, get samples out to you quickly. And so finally, I'll mention our sales team, and they're really the stars of the show. We've got a highly trained sales team, both inside and outside sales team, available to help you with any problems or applications you need help with. So this slide just covers their contact information, both phone and email, and they're ready and waiting to help solve any tape problems you might have. We've also included some resources in this deck that can take you out to mactac.com, where you can look at some of our blog posts where we're talking about different industry trends and challenges and applications. You can look at our full portfolio of products and get links to our technical resources page where you can find our product selector guide, where we've just issued a new version, by the way. Our foam bonding guides, so if you need a foam bonding reference, we've got a full study out there that you can download and keep at your fingertips. And we have technical data sheets available on all of our standard products. So that really covers the bulk of our webinar content today. Now we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. We do have a few that we received as part of our registration process, so we'll touch on those first, and then we'll touch on some that we've received since the start of the webinar. So one of the first questions we received was, what does it mean to be a foam fabricator, or what does foam fabrication mean? So Steve, maybe I'll tee that one up to you and you can give us your thoughts, and I'll chime in if I have anything to add.
Okay. Boy, you could probably just do a whole webinar on that. That's a varied answer, and probably changes based off who you ask. How I would answer that is, in the simplest terms, is that it's taking foam and it's cutting them and shaping them into individual parts to be used. For us, foam fabrication is almost always laminating an adhesive tape product to a foam and having it die cut into smaller parts. For some of those that might not be familiar with foam, some foams comes on rolls. Some foams are made in bun stocks that are 4 foot thick, 4 foot wide, and 8 foot long. And then that foams literally gets sliced or skived into individual sheets. And then those individual sheets go through a further step where you make little individual discrete parts out of that. And a lot of times adhesive is laminated to that. So that whole thing there is what we call, or what I interpret as, on my end, foam fabrication.
And I think one further point to make there is just the variety and different chemistries involved in things that we call foam. And, I think Steve probably touched on this earlier in the presentation. You've got cross-linked polyethylenes, EPDMs, you've got polyurethane foams. I mean, there are millions, I think, of foam formulas out there, or things that we call foam.
Yep, quite a few formulations of foam that's out there.
Yep.
And as a side note, everyone always asks what sticks to it. Just always remember, hey, you can reach out to us, send in a sample of your foam, we'll test our adhesives on it, we'll get you an answer. It's the quickest way of determining, because there's got to be 10,000 different versions of EPDM alone.
Thank you. So some of the next questions we received had kind of similar themes, so maybe we can cover these in one answer. Somebody asked, what are the difference in adhesives? And then another question we got was, when should you use a rubber adhesive? When would you use a rubber versus an acrylic adhesive? And how would you decide?
The last one's an interesting question, and I actually might phrase it of, when would you use an acrylic instead of a rubber? Because really, rubbers are more versatile and they're also more cost effective. So and they stick to a lot, and by being more versatile, they stick to a lot of different substrates, and they have more robust and more well-rounded properties. You get higher tack, higher peel, and higher shear out of all of our rubbers versus our acrylics. So my answer is always start off with a rubber. It's always going to be more economical, and it's going to be easier to stick to a lot of the plastics. Again, we're living in a plastic world. Rubber sticks to plastic much better. Where you do not want to use a rubber, and where rubber falls short, and where you don't want to look for an acrylic here, would be, number one, heat resistance. Anything over 180, and for our 555 Ultra Bond, maybe 200, even 210. Once you start getting above those temperatures, our rubbers are hot melt, and eventually, as the name suggests, they will melt again if they get a high enough temperature. So once you really get above the 225, 210, 220 threshold, you're going to really want to look for an acrylic. They're just going to do much better. And like I said, our 440 acrylics can go up to 500. Another area would be chemical resistance or solvent resistance. So rubbers are good for moisture, and rubbers are even good for water-based systems that have water-based cleaners in them, detergents, things like that. Where rubbers start falling short at, and I'm sorry, I should add, even with solvents, rubbers are good for alcohol and the polar solvents. If you're using any of the alcohols, acetone, ethyl acetate, things like that, rubber will be fine. It's too non-polar, and those solvents won't hurt it. Where rubbers start to fall short would be a lot of your organic fluids. So I never recommend for automotive rubber underneath of a hood or in marine, like near a sump, because organic fluids such as gasoline, diesel, motor oil, brake fluid, steering fluid, all those types of things, hydraulic fluids, those are going to start dissolving the rubber and breaking it down. Basically, it plasticizes and dissolves the rubber in turn and acts as a solvent for the rubber. So those would be areas where, certain chemical resistance of rubber would not be used. And then the other one would be any type of UV resistance. The last point gets a little confusion in that people think that because a rubber doesn't have UV resistance, it can't be used outdoors, and that's not true. Rubbers have great weatherability outdoors because moisture doesn't attack them. It's direct line of sight to UV that is detrimental to a rubber. So the example I always give here is that I would never use a rubber in a window application, because the window is transparent, translucent, and allows the UV rays to eventually make their way to the rubber adhesive and break it down. But if it's behind an opaque surface, say if it's used in roofing, which rubbers are used in roofing membranes all the time, they're outdoor, but they're buried and hidden from the UV, so that's fine. So the three areas would be temperature, chemical, and UV is where I would not use a rubber.
Gotcha. One of the other questions we received had to do with surface energy. Maybe just a quick talk on the difference between low and high surface energy substrates.
Sure, and Janet, think about it. This could even make a great webinar, maybe in this series too. Is just talking about the adhesives and surface energy.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Surface energy, everything that adheres has to deal with surface energy. So it doesn't matter if you're talking structural adhesives, pressure sensitive adhesives, sealants, caulks, or paints even. If you're adhering two surfaces together, surface energy always plays in. So every surface has what we call surface energy, and the basic form is it's the pull of attraction between the intermolecular bonds, or how much pull or attraction it has for, let's say, another surface. So if you're talking high surface energy, it's got a high affinity for, we'll say, an adhesive in this case. So things that are easy to stick to are stainless steel, metals, aluminum, glass. Those are very high surface energy. Some of your medium surface energy would be some of your higher, what we call higher surface energy plastics, but this is your ABS, your vinyl, your polycarbonate, your plexiglass, PMMA. These are your higher surface energy plastic materials, and they're still pretty easy to stick to. They have a high attraction for adhesives. Where you start running into a problem, especially with acrylics, is when you start getting into what we call the low surface energy materials. And these materials, polypropylene, polyethylene, and then TPOs, which is usually a blend of them. If you're familiar with the concept of polar versus nonpolar, these are all very nonpolar substances, so they don't have a lot of pull and attraction or affinity for adhesives. So the rule of thumb is always that, and if anybody has any questions, you could reach out to us. I can explain this into them in more depth and maybe a little slower. The rule of thumb is that you want your adhesive to be lower or equal to surface energy to the surface you're sticking to. The reason everything sticks to stainless steel and glass is because it's far lower than what the surface energy of glass is. Why acrylics have trouble sticking to polypropylene and polyethylene is that the surface energy of the adhesive is far greater than what the surface energy of those substrates are. A rubber, on the other hand, is sitting right roughly where those substrates are in terms of surface energy. And so a rubber can stick to that. And then I'll leave you with the final point is that if you look at the silicone used on release liners, that has even a lower surface energy than rubber adhesives. That's why nothing sticks to silicone. And that's why we use it as a release liner.
Great, thank you, Steve. One other question that came in during the webinar is what are the products you're coming out with at the end of the year that will compete with imports?
So we pride ourselves on our formulation, especially 100% solids. One area, though, that we're looking to do is formulating some emulsion acrylics. When you look at pure price, a water-based acrylic adhesive is still going to be cheaper than a UV-based adhesive because there's just far more water-based acrylics. I mean, your entire paint industry is based off of latex, which is water-based acrylics. So these are very cheap raw materials. Historically, though, emulsion acrylics haven't had the performance as solvent acrylics have. And for a lot of reasons, they won't always have or never have the performance of a solvent acrylic or a UV acrylic because of the cross-linking and the molecular weight and things like that. However, we are formulating some emulsion acrylics to be much closer in performance to, say, our UV acrylics or some of the solvent acrylics that are out there. So what we are doing is we are formulating some emulsion adhesives, getting some very unique properties, getting some really high performance out of a water-based system, and that's what we're looking to coat and launch at the end of the year to compete against some of these offshore tapes. Now, it's worth noting that those products might not ever have the same thickness and coat weights. When you're talking water-based adhesives, you simply can't get the deposition of adhesive as you can with a UV or even a solvent in some cases. But again, a lot of the offshore tapes that we're seeing, especially for like point of sale and signage and display, they're low deposition too. And this is really just a way for us to offer our customers a way to be competitive with a U.S. domestic made product versus an offshore import.
And it's worth mentioning that we're looking at a few different product forms for this line. Of course, transfer adhesives, double-coated tapes, and also some scrim and possibly tissue-based tapes for this portfolio of products. So stay tuned. There'll be more coming from Mac Tac. And then, Steve, I think that wraps it up for all of the questions we've received. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we go?
Nope, that's all the questions. That's all I've got.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We definitely appreciate you tuning in this afternoon. And there will be a recorded version of this webinar sent out in an email. I believe it's going to go out tomorrow. So if you'd like to forward it on to anyone or you want to review some of the material in there, feel free to replay it at your convenience. So with that, I'll say thank you and wish everybody a good afternoon or good late morning.
Thank you.